Well, Nonprofit Source just released some new stats on giving in churches, and to say it bluntly, the results are pretty shocking. We're going to unpack all of those results in this conversation. Let's do this. Hey guys, I'm Thomas.
And I'm Ian.
And today we're talking about 8 shocking church giving statistics that you need to know. We just got these stats. They're hot off the press from Nonprofit Source. They did the research, and we're just wanted to dig into them a little bit today and chat about some of the numbers. Surprising stuff, right, Ian?
Yeah, I was actually surprised, and we've seen statistics over the years for church giving and tithing and different things along those lines. And yeah, there were some new ones here on me. And we know stuff changes over the years, stats change, trends change, all of that. So yeah, I think this will really be helpful for some folks out there. It was helpful and surprising to me.
Yeah, agreed. That's true. Yeah. So, well, why don't we just dig right into it? Go ahead and give us the first one.
So here's a cool one. You know, this may be a surprise to some pastors and ministry leaders out there. 49% of all church giving transactions are made with a card. This one didn't really shock me personally. It might be a shock to some churches that traditionally haven't utilized online giving as much, but I think it's still a big deal because that's virtually half made with a card compared to obviously seasons and years past where we think of just the check being wrote and put in the offering plate, still a valid form of giving, but the fact that they're made with a card, I mean, I guess I'm not too surprised about this, but half is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I was surprised by it, but I was surprised because I thought it would be higher. That was a little bit surprising to me.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. That's one flip side to look at it.
I don't know like what you would even call using a card. I mean, I've never actually pulled out a card to do it. I mean, it was all done on my phone, I think, online.
Yeah.
So
my card is saved on, on my church's giving software and everything. Yes.
And so I guess that is that wouldn't include things like ACH transfers and those kinds of things. So I think what was surprising to me is I would, if you're comparing it like to digital giving versus physical giving, so checks and cash versus digital forms like ACH transfers and credit cards, then that would be surprising to me because I've heard other numbers like 70% are being done digitally now. But I guess that does make sense when I think about it when you include ACH transfers as not transactions with a card. They're done that way. So I think that I do both. I do some card, I do some ACH transfers for my giving. I haven't done a check or I don't remember the last time I put cash into the bucket or something like that, but I haven't done that in probably
years.
A decade at this point. It seems like so. That's so beyond something that I would consider. But yeah, that's interesting to say. Now, the thing about ACH transfers is you can save. The church saves a bunch of money on fees when you do an ACH transfer. So hopefully that's why that number is lower than I would expect. It's because most of it is ACH transfers, and it's not all just with a credit card. And when you think about it, I guess if we're paying. On average, churches pay about 3%, I think, in transaction fees on card transactions. That's a lot of money. If you're talking about half of all money donated to churches, card companies are taking 3% off the top of that. I mean, we're talking about literally like probably billions of dollars at this point. So pretty incredible stuff. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess where you were shocked, it does make sense. But yes, I think when you put in probably ACH, because I know a lot of the older demographic of church members possibly prefer ACH over a card. So maybe those folks represent a good chunk there. But that was still good.
Yep, good stuff. Okay, next one. Tithers make up 10 to 25% of a normal U.S. congregation, a normal church congregation. Tithers, so people that give 10% of their income, they make up 10 to 25%. And I believe for this number, that's people that identified themselves as tithers, because we have some statistics that come up later that kind of go seem opposite to this. But that's people, if you ask them, do you tithe? 10 to 25% of people that go to a church regularly say that they do tithe.
Yeah.
So I found that that's probably about in keeping with what I would expect. Maybe I would have thought a little bit higher. I mean, the 25 seems about right. The 10% seems a little bit low to me.
Well, it's weird that there's that range to me. That was a little strange. So,
Yeah,
but I mean, I know
so
that they can't probably exactly pinpoint that. So,
yeah, I imagine it varies by denominations, and some teach tithing more than others, and some don't teach tithing at all. So I think that that's something that didn't really surprise me. I think we'll talk a little bit later about what the numbers really look like of how many people actually tithe. That's a future statistic, but yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, this next one I think is this is cool. This is positive. Churches that accept tithing online increase overall donations by 32%.
Yeah, crazy.
So that's a big deal.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is. Yeah, so 32%. I mean, that's if you're a small church, and let's say you have $100,000 a year, or that's something like $8,000, a little over $8,000 every month coming into your church. So a relatively small church. We're talking about $32,000 extra a year. That's almost like a good sized chunk of an average salary, or a salary maybe for at least a part-time youth pastor or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what you can make a difference by if you pivot to doing online giving. So I mean, 32%, I hope that most of our audience has already made this pivot.
Right.
And I remember that in the pandemic time, this is funny. So we have a blog post that is all about online giving providers and how to choose the best one and those kinds of things. And we saw a few of our posts really skyrocketed in March of 2020. It was that post. There was a post about how to stream your services with like an ultimate guide to live streaming your church services. A few other ones, but that one in particular, it like went up by tenfold right in a 2-week period, and it stayed high for a long time because every church had to figure this out, it seemed like, during the pandemic, or we go belly up, basically. So
that's right.
I think you probably have this figured out, but I think really encouraging it is another thing. So I would really encourage churches to run with that, like to encourage people to make online giving their primary way of giving. There's all kinds of reasons, and I think you'll see an increase in your giving when you do something like that.
Yeah, I think it's, having consulted with pastors for years now, I used to run into, this, we're not sure if we want to do online giving and blah, blah, blah. I don't hear that with many churches. It comes up every once in a blue moon. So
we've been doing this since 2006, 2007, right, Ian? So it's like, back then, like most churches were very cautious about that. I don't want to do online giving. I don't know about the security. That's what we had to overcome typically is how do we help people feel comfortable? The mark of the beast, right, exactly. Some of the more spiritual complaints for that there. So
there you go.
All right, let me get the next one. This one I think is one of those ones that might make you feel a little bit disappointed or sick to your stomach. Christians are giving at 2.5% of their income. So that's the overall giving that when they take it, people that define themselves as Christians, 2.5% of their income. And listen to this, during the Great Depression, it was 3.3%. So 90 years ago, in the middle of the Great Depression, that was, the giving rate was like not even a small amount higher. It was like 40% higher at that time there. So pretty incredible to think about some of those kinds of numbers and what that means there and how much we've changed in this. This is what I was mentioning before too. This in part when we talk about tithing, well, clearly the vast majority of Christians are not tithing if 2.5% of income is that number there. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Ian?
Those saints of old have bigger homes in heaven. That's my first thought. So, but it does say, it is a little depressing. It says a lot about how times have changed and how Christians perceive giving and tithing. Not much to add. I think this next one actually is a good segue because it identifies kind of what we're talking about. And it's also not as positive of one, but only 3 to 5% of Americans who give to their local church do so through regular tithing. So again, that one, coincides with the one we just hit on because it's It's identifying how many actually tithe regularly. So
Yeah. Think about what that's saying. So it's saying that of all the people that give to their church, like, so this isn't like taking all Americans. This is taking all people who give to their church. Only 3 to 5%, let's call it 4% of them, are doing so through regular tithing.
Regular tithing,
by its very definition, I think that's what tithing is. Like, you can't
Right.
be like irregular tithing is not tithing, right?
It's
So
not tithing, right? Yes.
if you just kind of, I occasionally give 10%.
Sporadically, right?
Yeah. So that number means 4% of Americans who give to their church, like, so not all Americans, but 4% of the ones that give are doing so, like giving 10% that way. So, you know, I'm surprised by that. Again, I'm from a background that teaches tithing. We believe in tithing.
Right. Same.
It's one of my favorite topics to teach on. I've seen tithing make a bigger impact on my life than just about any spiritual discipline that we have taken on. And so I have it set up in my own life where on the first of the month, I have a tithe of our income come out of our out of my bank account into our church's account, and it just goes like clockwork. It's surprising to me. I don't know. Like, I know it's not like everybody. I know not everybody does it. I would have hoped that it would have been 20% or some kind of number like that.
Yeah.
I think 4 is maybe a little bit lower than I would have expected, but I knew I was ready to be disappointed by this number, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I guess it wasn't too terribly shocking, right? Unfortunately. So
that's it. So, all right, am I up next?
You got this next one, I think.
Okay, here we go. Next one is, when surveyed, 17% of Americans, they say that they regularly tithe. So here's one of those ones that we get back to this this idea that what people are actually doing and what people say that they're doing are very different things. Because again, that last one is 4% that regularly give, and then this is of all Americans. This is not just those that give to churches. This is of all Americans. 17% of them say that they regularly tithe.
Yeah.
So
you remember,
it's a bigger
I just
sample
wanted,
size. What's that? I'm sorry.
It is on the tip of my tongue. I have to interject it. So I won't name this person, but they were in my family, and when I asked them if they were tithing, they said, "Oh yeah, no, I pay off my credit cards every month."
Yeah.
So again, what they're saying, again, and that's left field, like someone who's really does not understand what tithing is all about. But in their mind, it was taking care of their debts and bills and all of those things right off the bat at the very beginning when they got paid. But yet, so again, there's
I think in part it's an education problem. I think you're right. Like, so people don't know. Like, I think people, when they think of tithing, they just think that, yes, like if I say, do you tithe to an average person, they may say, yes, I give regularly. Like I give to my church, to someone regularly. They consider that to be tithing. And, you know, we're all for that. I'm not here to cast judgment on those things. I just think there's a stark difference between, like, again, that 4% of ones that actually give to church, like they give to their church, only 4% of them are tithing versus 17% of all Americans say that they're tithing. So that would probably be, of people that go to church regularly and give to their church, you'd probably guess that would be something like 40 or 50% of them will claim to be tithing, when the numbers show that really maybe it's far lower than that. So I guess, you know, disappointing. I don't know if I'd say necessarily surprising. But
not
it's
shocking,
something that the kind of stuff that
still,
we're used to seeing, I think, when we look at these numbers.
Yep. Here's a unique one, I think, next for families making $75,000 plus a year. 1% of them gave at least 10% in tithing.
Right.
So that, it might be surprising. You know, it's funny. The first thing that I thought was, well, maybe because these folks are being taxed more heavily, they're giving less. And maybe that's one reason in the whole pot. But yeah, it's definitely, this one was very interesting. You would think, right, that those that have a higher income would give more. So
yeah, I mean, what you could infer from that is that people with lower income, based on the other numbers we've talked about already, are giving a higher percentage of their income than those that are with a higher income on things.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
You know, 75K, I think of that kind of like as a family. That's kind of like maybe a line for middle class, I guess.
Yeah.
Just, it depends on where
Middle,
you live.
lower.
Obviously,
Yeah.
75K
Yes.
is different in Hawaii, where I live, than it is
Or a
in
rural
Arkansas
area.
or something like
Right.
that, right?
Yep.
But just if we use that as a placeholder for, median income, and if, I think it's a little bit lower than that is what the median income is for a family.
Yeah.
But if you use that as a marker, like, that's surprising to me that 1% of them, of those families, they're actually giving 10% of their income there. I assume that's not what they say they're giving. I think that's probably actual numbers of how much they're giving.
Right. Yeah.
I heard a story once. I'm going to try and recount it, but it's a pastor has a guy in his church, and it's just kind of it's a fable, let's say.
Yeah.
A pastor has a guy at his church, and the guy comes to the pastor and says, "Pastor, I'm really struggling. I'm just starting a business right now. Is it okay if you just pray for me? I want to tithe, but if you would just pray for me for God to grow my business so that I can finally afford to tithe, I would really appreciate that." So the pastor, not a great pastor, but he actually says, "Okay, I'll pray for you for that, and then you can tithe." So he prays for him, and God answers his prayer. The guy's business thrives. He's doing really well. He's making $500,000 a year, absolutely killing it. And he goes back to the pastor and he says, "Hey, pastor, I just wanted to chat with you. Like, I'm doing so well in my business now, and I feel like I told you I was going to tithe, but I'm making $500,000 a year, so that's $50,000 that I'm supposed to tithe. Surely that's too much." And so the pastor said, "You're right." And the pastor prayed that the guy would reduce the man's business size and make his business even smaller to teach him a lesson. So that's kind of the story. I probably butchered it a little bit, but I think
I haven't heard that one. That's funny, but not funny.
That's the point. But I think that's what that shows, is that there's no amount of money that we can make that makes tithing comfortable. Right. So I've been practicing the tithe. I remember it clearly since April of 2009 was the first time that I had given, and I would have been one of those people that said, "Yeah, I tithe." But I was kind of like, I kind of had an understanding with God. I thought that, I'm doing ministry for you. So, you can kind of count that as a tithe. But in April of 2009, we made that pivot to really giving that kind of sacrificial level. And we have seen lots of different income levels in our lives since April of 2009, from being very poor at the time and below the middle class line, and to being above it in this season of our lives. Like, it's something that it's always a sacrifice. No matter how much you're making, it always hurts, whether you're giving $400 or $200 a month, or you're giving $2,500 a month, whatever it would be. It always feels like it pinches a little bit when you do it.
Oh, indeed. I can relate as well, as we've tithed for years and have seen, again, God bless us abundantly through that. I've told a little bit of my story when it comes to that. That was I was brought to faith a lot later, and while I was getting out of college, or right around that time, and one of the first messages I heard was about tithing, and at that time I was not making really any money, and I was like valeting cars, and and then now, yes, you're right. It's always never going to be totally a comfortable thing, I don't think, for most believers. So, but these are.
I don't think it should. Like, I think it should cost you something, right? I think it shouldn't be comfortable. If it's comfortable, it's probably a sign that you should be giving more. So I think it's one of those things that it's designed that way to make us feel it, and it's a way that we put God first in our lives. So I think that's important to remember. So
I think we have one more.
One more, yes, and this is probably the one that was. I think it's. Well, I'll just share it here. It's the average giving by adults who attend U.S. Protestant churches is about $17 per week. So that's how much the average adult gives to a church. So this one, I would say, is, I was actually a little surprised, because I've been using a higher number when I think of how much, when we look at all the general numbers that people give to churches. So what that amounts to is something in the neighborhood of about $80 per month is how much the average adult would give to their church. And again, this is not all Americans. This is people that attend not even Catholic churches, but Protestant churches only. They give about $80 a month, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 a year, maybe a little bit under $1,000 a year. Call it $900 a year, something like that.
Yeah.
So I have been using as a placeholder the numbers that I had seen at times in the past where it was $100 per person in attendance per month. And that includes children, right? So that's not just adults, because presumably a family that has 3 kids, maybe they have a higher income and they're able to give a little bit more in those areas. So, so to me, that's a little bit surprising, but I think that's actually a really important number for us to keep in mind. You can kind of use it as a placeholder, $80 a month, and you can take a look at your own church if you're pastoring a church to kind of see, how is my church, like kind of a little barometer? How are we doing? Like, are we better than the average church in these areas?
Yeah.
Like if we have by adults again, so if you take a look at the number of people that are adults in your church and you times that by 80, is that kind of in line with your monthly income at your church there? And if it's not, then maybe you have some conversations. Maybe you talk about this more from the pulpit and think through how we can help people to make that leap to online and do some of those kinds of things. So I was interested by this. It's lower than I expected. I would have hoped that it would have gone up by now. I was hoping to see something like $30 a month. Sorry, $30 a week as the number there. But I thought it was interesting. Thoughts?
I think stats really will help pastors, kind of like you just said, use this as a barometer. So my hope with all of this for every pastor, ministry leader listening is that it'll, as you kind of think through this, maybe like you just said, help you kind of understand how to address this with your church. Maybe when you preach across the pulpit, to know the health of your church to a large extent. I love statistics. I've loved them for years, and I do think that they not only identify, they help us know what goals we should strive for. So I just hope that that's the takeaway. Like you said, some of these are depressing, but we always want to turn that into something positive, right?
Yeah. So it's like, don't be that guy that refuses to get onto the scale and take a look at your weight because you don't want to be bummed out by it. Just know the reality, and then we can take some steps to address it. So you should be measuring all these kinds of things in your church anyway. You should know, the amount that the average family gives to our church, or the average adult, and what do these numbers look like for us. These are important metrics. I think that they're certainly, sometimes we have this reputation that they're the only metrics, and obviously that's not the case. There are lots of metrics we can be using and measuring and looking at those things, but these are important ones because they do measure people's faithfulness and how well we're discipling people if we're encouraging them and teaching them what the Lord says about giving. So all that to say, I hope this has been helpful to you. If it has, please let us know down in the comments. If you have any questions, or if you found any other stats that maybe you've seen out there that maybe contradict these, or one of these that you found really surprising, let us know down in the comments. We do love to take these comments and turn them into future episodes of the Reach Right podcast. So please do drop us a line in there. Thanks so much for being a part of the Reach Right family, and we'll see you next week.